Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Digital Law News. This is brought to you by Digital Law and produced by Anson Evaluate. Just for those who don't know, Digital Law is a niche law firm based in the UK, and we specialise in all things to do with social media law, data protection, and other technology issues as well. So I'll just pass over to my colleague Peter to introduce himself before we get started.
Thanks, Laura. My name's Peter. I'm a solicitor and the managing director at Digital Law, and we do a lot of work around that intersection between law and technology, everything from data protection to cyber security, and some interesting stories this week with regards to everything from security to games that encourage younger users to think about their privacy online, and some more enforcement from the ICO. So I will pass back to Laura to kick us off.
Thanks, Peter. So yeah, the first story today is one from the BBC, and this is labelled "Did Weak Wi-Fi Password Lead the Police to Our Door?" So this is a story, an article about somebody called Kate and Matthew, not obviously the real names, but basically one morning they got a knock on the door from the police, who were investigating a serious crime involving images of child abuse being posted online. The couple were alleged of basically posting 4 photos which were category B child abuse of nature, being the second most serious in kind, on an online chat around a year before they got the knock on the door. They informed that this information was passed on from the National Crime Agency, suggesting that these photos were posted from their specific IP address. So the couple insisted from the beginning that they had nothing to do with it, and it wasn't until a few months later that their name was actually cleared and the case was actually dropped against them. They realised that basically the only explanation as to how this actually happened was somebody getting into their computer through their Wi-Fi box and actually gaining access to their network so that they could post these photos in, making it look like it was them. So it wasn't until they had a conversation with a friend who actually worked in cybersecurity that alerted them the possibility of getting in through a router. And this was all caused by not changing the default password on their router. So it's just a reminder to make sure you change your passwords and make sure it's not easily guessable as well.
Yes, thank you, Laura. It's quite a scary story, this. An awful lot, in fact, and probably the vast majority, I think, of routers that people end up having installed at home when they have their broadband fitted. So in this instance, it was Vodafone, but similar for BT and some of the other networks as well. You get, a little router that is plugged into the wall, and that's then what you end up connecting your devices to via Wi-Fi. And very often there is a password already supplied, and it'll probably be something that can go onto either a key fob, or they'll have stickers with it, and you tend to sort of use it thinking, well, this is what I have to have. But in fact, no, the factory settings mean that you can install your own passwords and indeed then password protect the admin page that deals with these security settings. So it is definitely worth doing that, but of course the manufacturer doesn't advise you to do that. They want you to just use the settings that they have provided you with, but that is, as we've seen in this instance, susceptible to a brute force attack. So we end up always advising our clients, look, particularly if you are working from home, and let's face it, over the course of the last year, if you or potentially a partner haven't been working from home, more than likely you may have children and other family members that have had to work from home. And therefore, you're relying on these Wi-Fi networks. They're being used far more than would otherwise be the case. They might be handling large amounts of personal data, a lot of commercial or confidential data if you are doing carrying out your business and your work from home. And we always say, look, make sure that you have got this thing protected. Make sure you are not passing out the password willy-nilly to any guest that comes round. But in this instance, it's more than that. It's not just telling people what the password is, it's also change it and change it regularly. I think 2 quick points on the consequences of this story as well, though. One is that where you have images involving children or abuse, or both, the authorities tend to have a bit of a sense of human failure on this. So where, even in this instance, there was a explanation that could be found fairly quickly, they still had to jump through the hoops and treat the couple in question as though they were responsible for these images having been uploaded, because that is all the evidence the police had to go on.
Yeah.
And as we know, if the police don't end up acting on this evidence and something does go wrong, it is the police and the authorities and local authorities that are criticised. So, you know, always be doubly careful, particularly if, for example, you get a family member or friend who says, oh, I've received this image and I don't know what to do, and they email it to you. You know, do not then hit reply back, because you could then be guilty of the offence of sending that image, whether it, you know, you might be in the context of trying to help a friend, doesn't matter. You have sent that image electronically. Bear in mind that even the BBC fell foul of this a few years ago when they had found some very sensitive images on Facebook. They wanted to alert Facebook about it, so they put them on an email, sent them to Facebook, and Facebook reported them to the police for it. So just be incredibly careful about sending images that could be containing abuse online, even if you think the context means it's okay. It really is not. Second point is that then the damage that has on the lives of the individuals. And this article talks about the fact that, for example, this couple could no longer homeschool their children. So imagine that during the pandemic. What are you supposed to do? The police ended up telling social services that they had to act on these suspicions. So the mother lost her role as a school governor. When the children went back to school, the parents were not allowed onto the property of that school. And I'm afraid even when this ends up then being cleared, there is always, it's not as though you're going to be able to put something in the PTA newsletter saying, oh, by the way, it's all okay, we've been cleared of those awful things you might have heard about. That isn't going to happen. So unfortunately, even though you know that you've been cleared, there is always, people think, well, no smoke without fire, and there's always rumours and things. It's a terrible situation to get into. So another reason to take real good care of your electronic environment online and the images that you are knowingly in control of, and then having plenty of protection to make sure that your system is not compromised, as happened in this instance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leads on pretty well to the next story as well, which is on about from the NCSC about having very secure passwords. So this is a call for fans to get cyber secure before summer of sport. So I think it is more targeted towards like fans and people watching football online or streaming different sports and etc. But I think it can apply in most situations as well to other accounts like Netflix, your cinema accounts, anything to do with streaming accounts or anything like that, or just any account online. So it's basically just encouraging fans to protect their online streaming accounts, making sure that they have good passwords in place, not using weak passwords that can be easily guessed or have been compromised in the past. And the NCSC are basically saying that you should be using 3 random words and then maybe writing them down somewhere so that you can remember where it's not going to be accessed if you're going to forget it easily. The guidance does actually suggest that you save it on your browser, but it's not always the best thing to do, because obviously if then your computer or anything or your browser gets hacked into, that'd be there as well. So yeah, it's just making sure that none of your accounts basically get hacked into, just trying to use the best protection as you can.
Yes, and it's making the point that even if it is an account you use for streaming, there can still be risk associated with it. So don't think, oh, it's my Netflix account or it's my account so I can log in on a friend's smart TV and watch the football during the Euros this summer, or the Test cricket, or the 100, or even if you've got a Formula 1 TV subscription. All of these sorts of things now, they all require user accounts. They will all be carrying the financial details associated to the payments you're making to purchase the service, and there is still a significant amount of personal data on there, so it is still worth protecting. I think it's also worth flagging up at this point as well, our usual message to say be careful of the texts and emails you might be receiving. So you could be receiving an email that's supposed to, you think, is coming from your streaming provider asking you to log in and confirm details. I received an email from the cinema chain that I'm a member of at the weekend saying, please log in to confirm the level of your membership. So of course I didn't log in. I then went along to the website run by the chain, logged in, no such request, no need to do that at all. So that just sort of verified that clearly the membership information has been leaked, in that they knew to contact me with that email, and that I was a member. So clearly there has been an element of things being leaked, and also they had set up a cloned domain that was very, very close to the genuine cinema chains domain. So it's just, you know, as the economy now opens back up, as we're starting to use services again, be very, very wary of the communications that you might think are genuine that you're getting from providers that you're starting to use more again, now that we're getting back out into the wide open world again. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think there is some guidance on either our website or Anson Evaluate's website as well about phishing. Just the simple things to basically look out for in terms of like checking the email address, making sure you don't click on the link, and just things you can look out for to make sure you know that the email is actually genuine before you act on it as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well worth a look.
Yeah, absolutely. So sticking with the stories from the NCSC then, they've actually launched a new online game to give children a head start with staying cyber secure. So this is kind of the NCSC's, because obviously the NCSC have got the technology like the exercise in the box and things like that aimed towards businesses. But this is just more an example of them trying to help the general public getting cyber secure. So the game is called Cyber Sprints, and it's actually an education cybersecurity game targeted towards primary schools, youth clubs and other youth organisations. So the game actually just sees users race against the time and tackle cybersecurity questions in a bid to score points and beat the cyber villains. So it's aimed towards children at 7 to 11 years old, but it's basically just those who are now growing up with technology and now probably more risk it because they're using it every day, whether it's school, homeschooling, or just being online in general. So it's a good thing to get people to have a go at.
It certainly is. I think it's a very brave attempt by the NCSC to reach out to those who we know are growing up on using this technology every day and relying on it, to make them see that there are bad actors out there, and to start thinking about the risks from an early age. I think quite often it's quite difficult to speak to someone who is a teenager or in their 20s and has been used to using this very ubiquitous technology, and is then thinking, well, nothing's ever happened to me. What's the problem? Why do I have to be careful? It's all, you know, this is all being made out to be a much bigger deal than it is. And it's like, no, this is actually getting kids to appreciate this from an early age. So I think the NCSC should be applauded for this step. I am sure they may look back in a few years and probably be quite embarrassed what they thought was something that kids from 7 to 11 would want to look at, but everyone's got to start somewhere. So, you know, I'm sure they might end up saying, no, we'd rather go and play something else, but, you know, let's hopefully teachers, parents, etc., will at least try it, and will get their kids to engage with it. And if it starts a conversation, then that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to a ICO story then. So this is the ICO calling for views on their new guidance. So this is the anonymisation, pseudonymisation and privacy enhancing technologies guidance. Bit of a mouthful. So they're basically issuing a chapter of this draft guidance. I think they're doing once a month or maybe a little bit more, right up until autumn, and basically asking for people's views on it. So the first chapter basically defines anonymisation and pseudonymisation and explores the legal, policy and governance issues around the application of it in the context of the data protection law. So it says where it is possible to anonymise data, what benefits it has and when it might be used. So the ICO have stressed that the input at this early stage can make significant difference as they're using the responses to better develop their guidance, etc. So you can send your feedback in by simply emailing anonymisation@ico.org.uk. and referring to the specific chapter you wanted to give feedback on, and then they'll basically take a look at that and incorporate any feedback into their development of the guidance.
Yes, I think this is a really good step by the ICO. I think it is important to remind people of the fundamental basic that data protection law applies to personal data. If there is no personal data in the data set, GDPR, the Data Protection Act 2018, they fall away. So if you are able to anonymize or pseudonymize data, no data protection problems, simple as that. So it is a great way of being able to demonstrate effective compliance. So I think the ICO should be applauded for trying to put this guidance together. I think it is quite savvy that they are saying it is draft guidance. You can guarantee that if they had just published it and said, here is the guidance, they would have been open to criticism from users on different social networks and Twitter and Reddit, all turning around saying, oh, they've got this wrong, they've not done this right, they've not done that right, what are they doing? So they're saying, look, work with us on this. This is the basic compliant. This is the basic guidance that we give based on what the law and the regulations say and our experience so far. But they are asking for the public to engage with them. So this is the opportunity to do so and make sure that the guidance they produce really is the best it possibly can be. So I think it's worth taking a look at the information on ico.org.uk there, and send them an email at that specific address they've come up with, anonymisation@ico.org.uk, if you want to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to our final story for today then. So this is another from the ICO. So this is in regards to American Express Services Europe Limited. So they've actually been fined for monetary penalty. Basically, they've been sending direct marketing messages. They actually sent about 4 million, over 4 million of them between a 12-month period, so 1st of June in 2018 and 31st of May in 2019. And these were sent by American Express Services Europe Limited, so AMEX, which contained direct marketing material for which subscribers had not provided adequate consent. So this was a fine that was taken under the Regulation 22 of the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations of 2003, so PECA. And I just thought it was, I don't think I mentioned how much the fine was. So the fine was for £90,000. But I just thought it was worth mentioning as well that under the PECA, the data controller can be fined up to £500,000. So this is considerably less of a fine based on their maximum that they can fine, and especially in consideration to how many messages were sent. So a good comparison is a fine that was given to 2 companies in a cumulative total fine in March this year, and 2 companies were actually fined £330,000 cumulatively for sending less nuisance texts that were actually sent on this occasion. So I just thought it was worth mentioning that sometimes you can send more but still get a lesser fine from the ICO as well.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think this is a fascinating case. I think, first of all, we have to make it clear that, as you say, this is a fine under the Privacy and Electronic Communications Reg, so it's not GDPR or the Data Protection Act 2018. It is the specific regulations on electronic communications. And also the amount is interesting. I mean, those 2 fines in March, I think it specifically says nuisance text messages. In this instance, they seem to be saying, well, it's more the fact that you sent out 4 million direct marketing messages, and they felt that they were not in the spirit of the regulations because there had not been that element of adequate consent. I think the word adequate is quite interesting there, which makes you think that they were, perhaps they did have consent, but it was perhaps a consent that had been provided 4 years ago, or perhaps consent at the point where they had opened their Amex card and it hadn't been updated. So you can envisage there would have been potentially many issues with regards to consent there that may have been proved problematic. It is still a comparatively small fine. I think we're, £90,000, I'm sure, is going to be keeping Amex awake. It's more the bad publicity and the bad practice that I think will concern them, that the regulator has highlighted here with this monetary penalty. But I think also we can look at the fact that, you know, we keep a regular eye on the enforcement that the ICO carries out. There's been lots of enforcement with regards to the privacy and electronic communications regs over the course of the last year. Rather less in relation to GDPR. We've had some big decisions, BA and Marriott finally going through, but across Europe, the amount of GDPR enforcement remains comparatively low, I think, compared with what was originally envisaged and hoped for. And in comparison with that, the UK is doing pretty well. But because of the low number of actual monetary penalties and enforcement handed out when it comes to GDPR, that really isn't saying much. So it's good that the ICO is using its powers. It is aware of the fact it's not just looking at things from a GDPR perspective, it's looking at its other regulations as well. But I'm hopeful that we will get more substantial GDPR enforcement at some point, because only through the use of the big stick will you be able to ensure that the really big organisations are properly adhering to it. And given the amount of work we do with our clients, helping them with different online systems, I am becoming concerned with the volume of platforms out there selling products and services to other businesses to help them get online and to do different things. And then you look at the way they're using the data, and I have concerns that it's not necessarily compliant with GDPR. And I think some people are now making a value judgment to say, well, no one will work it out, no one will actually do anything about it, we'll just carry on. And that becomes very dangerous if you're going to have a high level of regulation like GDPR. It only works if you've got a high sustainable level of enforcement behind it. And that's, as I say, not a criticism just of the ICO, that is a criticism when it comes to enforcement across Europe being led by the European Data Protection Board.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's everything we've got time for today. So we just want to remind you about the services that Anson Evaluate offer as well. So a big thank you for them for helping us produce this webinar and podcast. So just for those who don't know, Anson Evaluate is a training and other services provider. They provide a lot of webinars and different training online and in person as well. Now everything can kind of get a bit more back to normal. So if you are interested in receiving any training for your business or any of your customers or anything like that, just drop them a line to admin@ansonevaluate.com as well. We can get you a call set up and see where they can help. So is there anything you want to add on that, Peter?
Yes, just to say, yes, if you'd like your own webinar or podcast, then drop a line to Anson Evaluate and they'd be very keen to present it, to produce it for you. I should add as well that we are working on a webinar in the next couple of weeks. For those who are listening thinking, why haven't we referred to the big news from Northern Ireland with regards to social media and the decision there with regards to Dr. Christian Jessen and Arlene Foster? We'll be covering that in a social media update in the next few weeks. And we will be looking at that in the context of other big court cases that have taken place on social media. And that will hopefully be an interesting and informative discussion that our listeners might wish to register and watch live and ask questions at the time. So please take a look at our social media. By the time that this recording goes out, you might find the links already there on our Facebook page, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, for digital law and or Anson Evaluate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I will put the registration for that in the recording for this in the description if it is out on time. But yeah, as Peter says, it'll probably be later this month. So we just want to remind you as well of the GDPR compliance manual for legal practices that we have on at the minute. So just a reminder, it's on sale for £99, which is around 50% off the original price that it was originally. So this contains a lot of forms, templates and checklists to try and get your business up to speed with data protection. So I'll just pass over to you, Peter, just to give everyone a little bit more information about that.
Yep, this is our GDPR guide, which contains those key things, forms, templates, checklists, and gives you the practical tools to be able to demonstrate compliance with Data Protection Act 2018. Those of you familiar with the regime from GDPR will know that it's very good at telling you what to do, but it doesn't really tell you how to do it. So this provides you with those practical tools to help you demonstrate compliance within your organisation. And while it's designed for law firms, we've had copies purchased from accountants and schools and those in other highly regulated sectors like financial services, and they've found it very helpful too. So do feel free to drop us a line to get hold of that copy at the discounted rate for those who are listeners and viewers of this recording.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So thank you for everyone for listening today. Just a reminder, this podcast, our webinar, is available on our YouTube channel, our website, and on streaming platforms like Spotify and other podcast sites as well. So we will be back next week for another episode, but for now, we hope to see you next week again, and thank you for listening.